Ginseng, souchong, green tea, oolong, brew that cup, but not for too long.
Hello everybody, hello children. Welcome to this online field trip. I'm Sam and today we're in the Wirral, which is in the northwest of England. Now we're here to learn all about one of our favourite drinks in the UK. Now this drink is so popular that we drink 165 million cups each day. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? Of course, I can only be talking about our national drink, which is tea. We drink so much of it. Now we're here in a tea factory in their amazing tea tasting room to learn how they make these things, tea bags. This is our guide for today. This is Keith.
Hello.
Thank you for having us here, Keith. Now,
No problems.
Keith is a tea expert. Now, first of all, Keith, we're here, as I said, in the Wirral, near Liverpool. And this area has a historic connection, doesn't it, with tea?
It does. So Liverpool was one of the first ports, as well as London, which imported tea into the UK. And there were some Chinese immigrants who actually came and settled within Liverpool, who were part of actually bringing that tea into the UK as well in the kind of early 1800s as well. The other exciting thing is obviously from our perspective is we've been manufacturing tea here for over 40 years.
Wow, fascinating. So how many tea bags would you make here?
Well, we make 100 million tea bags a week. Now, 100 million tea bags seems like a lot of tea bags, but just to give you some idea, every 5 weeks we make enough tea bags to lay side by side that would actually stretch all the way around the world.
The world!
Which is amazing.
We're used to sort of dealing with football pitches and, maybe filling trucks, but around the world, that is pretty crazy.
And I've got another interesting little fact, which is every week, the 100 million tea bags, if you actually made those into a cup of tea, they would actually be equivalent to fill 65 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Wow! So much tea. We love our tea in the UK,
we do.
though, don't we? I think you're the perfect person to guide us on this online field trip. So what are we going to learn today in the factory?
Well, we're going to first of all see how tea is processed, how tea is grown. We're going to see how it's plucked, how it's processed in the country, and then we're also going to see how we actually pack it here.
Fantastic. I think we should meet our schools then, do you? Let's go
that'd be
over and
great.
find out who's joining us on today's online field trip. So let's go over to Holy Trinity Rosehill School now in Stockton-on-Tees, where Mr. Waller's class is taking part again. Hello, children. Hello, Mr. Waller. It's really great to have you taking part again. Fantastic. Let's go over to our next school, which is Cornice Park School now in Flint, where Miss O'Neill's class is taking part. Hello, children. Hello, Miss O'Neill. Fantastic. It's really great to have you taking part. Let's go to Charlton Manor, who are in London, and it's Miss Gould's class that's taking part today. Hello, children. Hello, Miss Gould. It's really great to have you all taking part. And finally, to Stevenson Memorial Primary, which is in North Tyneside, where Miss McEwen's class is taking part. Hello, children. Hello, Miss McEwen. Fantastic. We've got a lively bunch today,
Fantastic,
Keith.
we have, haven't
It's
we?
going to be a great online field trip. I think the best place to start is to learn a little bit about the history of tea, first of all. So I have some questions for you, put you to the test. When did people start drinking tea, first of all?
Well, it's believed that the Emperor Shen Nung, over 4,500 years ago in China, was actually sitting underneath a tea bush, drinking a cup of hot water. As the wind blew, the tea leaves flew off the tea bush into his cup of hot water. He drank the drink. He loved the product, and then obviously tea became a beverage which was consumed pretty regularly within China as well.
Wow, I love that story.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
was
it's
a complete accident that
a
people
complete
started
accident,
drinking tea. That's great. And so how about us in the UK?
So in the UK, we've only been drinking tea from about the 1660s, and certainly when it was brought in, Charles II married a Portuguese princess called Catherine Braganza. She's responsible. She loved tea that was being brought in by the Portuguese explorers. She obviously brought tea to the UK. Charles II and the aristocracy would also consume tea as well. So that's how it came to the UK.
Great. So it's kind of a luxury drink at the start, wasn't it? So how did it become kind of an everyday drink for us in the UK and for everybody?
Well, it was a luxury drink at the start because of scarcity of supply, plus also the government taxed the tea very highly as well, so it was very expensive to consume. It only really changed in the 1800s, where more suppliers started to bring tea in, and also whereas whereas most of the tea used to come in from China, other countries also started growing tea. So countries like India, Ceylon and Kenya also started to grow tea. So of course there was more supply, the tax was removed, it became more of an affordable drink for people to consume.
Fantastic, and I'm really thankful it is because I love a cup of tea. So where does our tea in the UK come from? Which country mainly?
Well, tea comes from over 40 different origins, but the majority of tea which we drink in the UK actually comes in from Eastern Africa. About 75% of tea comes in from Eastern Africa, 15% from India, and the remainder from a number of other origins as well.
Because I know the saying is for all the tea in China, that there's a saying, so I assumed that all the tea came from China.
No, not certainly from the UK market as well. So although China grow the most tea in the world, most of it's actually drunk in China rather than actually being exported.
So they keep their Chinese tea to themselves.
Yeah, they do, yes.
That's great. We are learning so much. Thank you, Keith. We're learning so much already. I know that you have been learning about tea in your classrooms already, children, as well. So I think it's about time we put you to the test and found out what you've learned, and maybe you know a few things that Keith doesn't know. So let's go over to Holy Trinity Rosehill School now, where Mr. Waller's class is taking part. And I'm wondering, children, if you could tell us a few of the facts that you've learnt this week.
The first tea plantation in the UK was developed in 2009 in Cornwall.
That's a really, really good fact that they've learned. So the first tea plantation in the UK was 2009 in Cornwall. So that's quite early.
Yes, that's right.
Recent.
That's right, yeah.
Very great learning. OK, let's get another fact.
It takes 3 years before a tea bush is ready to be harvested. Then leaves are picked from the top of the plant every fortnight.
Fantastic. It's a really good fact. So it takes 3 years to grow the tea plant, and then it's the top of the leaves that are picked to make the tea?
That's right, yeah. It's the top 2 leaves and the bud which they pick at the top before they process it.
Great. Are you impressed what they've learned so
far?
far?
Very impressed, very impressed.
Let's go over and get another fact now from Holy Trinity Rosehill.
Legend says that back in 2700 BC, the Emperor of China was drinking a bowl of hot water when leaves fell into the bowl. The Emperor liked the new taste, and this is how tea was invented.
Fantastic. OK, so it's 2700 BC. The Emperor of China was drinking a hot water under the tree, and the story that you told us.
Yes,
and then that's how
fantastic.
tea was invented. So they already knew that,
They already
Keith,
knew that,
beforehand. That's absolutely fantastic. Now, I know there's lots of different types of tea, Keith. So would you talk us through some of the different types of tea? We have some tea here, and children, you should have some tea in your classrooms as well. So this is a perfect opportunity to pass it round and smell and take a look.
Okay, so all the tea that we certainly consume comes from the Camellia sinensis bush. It's just a question. The differences that you find are the different countries the tea is grown in, because they might have different climate or different weather or different soil conditions as well will make a difference to the tea. The second thing is how the tea is processed. And what we have here is we have tea. This is all from the same tea bush, but just processed in different ways. This is post-fermented tea, which is squashed together to form a brick. And the way that you actually drink this tea is to break off a little piece of the brick and actually put it into tea. You can brew this tea about 6 times, so you can use it once and use it again and again and again.
So it's strong, very strong.
Very strong as well. Second tea that we have here is green tea. And what we do here is just steam and pan the tea, and that allows the tea to retain some of its natural characteristics as well. Yellow tea, which is next door, is very similar to green tea. It's just allowed to moisturise slightly longer as well, which gives it its yellow colour as well. Next tea we have along here is white tea. This tea is actually picked from the top tips of the tea bush as well. It's actually baked, then dried, and the reason it's called white tea because you can see some of the flakes of kind of white coloured tea in the product. The next tea along is oolong tea. This tea is broadly, you might even be able to see just here the top 2 leaves and a bud, which are still on here, and you can probably just see the stalk of the tea here as well. So this is just partially oxidated before it's actually processed as well from there. The majority of the tea that we drink in the UK is black tea, and this is the process. So this is some black tea which is being processed, and we're going to find out a bit more in the video as to how we actually make black tea, which is consumed certainly most of the tea in the UK is consumed like that.
Great, thank you, Keith. So I'm right in listening just then and hearing that this is all from the same plant, or
It
the
is.
same tea bush.
Same tea bush family,
And
yeah.
it just looks so different.
It does,
as well.
it does.
It's amazing. Different processes make different types of tea. Okay, I think we've learned so much. I think we should get some questions for you, Keith. I think the children probably have a few questions. So let's go over to Cornish Park School now. And do we have any questions there, Miss O'Neill, for Keith at this point?
My question is all tea fair trade?
That's a really good question. So is all tea fair trade, Keith?
Not all tea is fair trade. If it's a tea estate which is fair trade, it needs to actually be accredited by the Fair Trade Association. So probably the amount of tea we sold, probably 5 to 10% is probably fair trade as well. But the tea estate has to be accredited by the Fair Trade Organisation.
That's really interesting. Yep. Great question there. Let's get another one from Cornish Park.
Why do you only use the tip of the leaf?
That's a really good question. Thank you so much. Why do we only use the tip of the leaf, Keith?
Well, it's not just the tip of the leaf, actually. So I've actually brought a diagram just to show you. This is actually the top of the tea bush here. And so it's the top 2 leaves here. And this is the bud within the tea leaf. So we do actually, it's not just the tip, it's the top 2 leaves and the bud that we actually use on the tea bush.
But we never use any of the other, you never use any of the other leaves underneath?
No, that'll grow through. That'll grow through will be pruned by the tea estate owner.
Wow, okay, that's a really good question. Do we have another one from Cornish Park?
Why do some people have sugar in their tea?
Lovely question, really like this question. Why do people put sugar in their tea, Keith?
It's all down to personal taste. If you like to have sugar in your tea, have sugar in your tea as well. Obviously, it's more healthier not to have sugar in your tea as well, but it's just down to personal choice.
I used to have 2 sugars in my tea, and now if someone puts even so much as a granule of sugar, I can't drink it. I have to make a fresh cup. It's really weird. Your taste buds get used to it, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get one more question from Cornish Park. Some great questions coming from that class today.
Do you dunk biscuits in your tea?
What a lovely question. So do you dunk biscuits in your tea?
Of course I do. You can't have a cup of tea without a biscuit.
Doesn't everybody dunk a biscuit in their tea?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a fine line though, isn't there, children? When you dunk a biscuit in your tea, you can't leave it in too long or it flops in, and then you've ruined your tea, really, haven't you?
Yeah.
And if you forget and you drink to the bottom and you're like, oh, soggy.
Nice sludge at the bottom.
Fantastic. Well done with those questions, children. I think we should learn a little bit more about tea now. It really is fascinating. So it's time for our first video now, and this is all about the first part of the story. This is how tea grows.
How does tea grow? Tea comes from leaves picked from an evergreen bush called Camellia sinensis. Black, green and white tea are all made from the same plant. The different colours and flavours depend on the climate and location that the tea is grown in, and then also in the way the tea is processed. Tea grows best when the climate is warm and there's plenty of rain. A lot of tea is grown in Kenya. In fact, after China and India, Kenya is the 3rd biggest tea producer in the world. This is where 3/4 of the tea we drink in the UK comes from. A tea plant starts life as a seed or as a cutting taken from the parent plant. On this plantation in Kenya, they usually use cuttings. The small plants are protected from sunlight and pests inside this polytunnel. This is where they will grow for 10 months until they are 60 centimetres tall and ready to be planted in the main fields. After 3 years, the bush is mature enough and they begin picking the tea. In Kenya, tea is harvested all year round. They only pick the 2 newest leaves and the bud. Because almost all tea is picked by hand, the tea bush is kept at waist height so it's easier for the workers to reach. New leaves are picked from the bush every 7 to 15 days. The tea leaves are taken from the fields to the processing house on lorries. The lorry has specially designed hooks to hang the bags of tea on. This stops the leaves spilling out or getting damaged. Once the tea arrives at the factory, it's unloaded and checked for quality. Next, the tea is loaded onto this special machine and taken to be processed. First, the tea is dried. This process is called withering. They wither the tea by blowing warm air over the leaves. The withered leaves are then placed onto a conveyor belt, ready for the next step. This machine finely chops and flattens the leaves. Then a process called oxidation starts. This develops the flavour of the tea and makes it change from a bright green to brown colour. Now the tea needs to be dried out completely. This oven is warmed up to 180 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, and the water content reduces from 86% to 3%. It takes 4 kilograms of fresh leaves to make just 1 kilogram of dried tea leaves. The dried tea is now graded in this machine. Each sieve is a different size, so it collects the largest leaves at the top and the smallest ones at the bottom. The larger leaves are used for loose leaf tea. The smaller ones will go into tea bags. Once the tea has been processed, it is loaded into 60 to 70 kilogram tea sacks. They are lined with silver foil to protect the tea from absorbing moisture. Then they are shipped from Mombasa in Kenya to Liverpool, ready to be made into tea bags.
So there's lots of work that goes into making sure the tea is ready for us to drink. And Keith, we saw in the video just then, there's a really important process called oxidation. Could you explain that to us?
Of course I can. So oxidation is also known in the tea industry as fermentation. And fermentation is about making sure that we allow the tea to get its flavour as well. So this is a very important process. If you don't allow the tea to go through the oxidation process long enough, it tastes very grassy. If you go too long, it tastes a bit winey as well. So it's about making sure we get that time right.
A really delicate process then.
It is, because it brings all the flavours out.
Oh, that's fantastic. As you can see, we have now moved. We're on the factory floor now. This is where the big paper sacks full of tea arrive when they come to the factory. And there's loads of things happening around us, Keith. So could you take us through some of the things that happen in here? Okay,
so we've seen the tea being actually made and produced in Kenya. Once it arrives in the factory, it arrives in the paper sacks. The tea buyers and blenders will actually taste the product, and then they'll blend some of those teas together into what they call a blend. It's a bit like a recipe, and that recipe will then be programmed into the computer. Just over on the computer over here is where we'll actually program that recipe into the computer, and then we get our helper, Robbie the robot, to help us actually put that blend together.
Can I meet Robbie the robot?
Of course you can meet Robbie the robot as well.
Let's go and meet Robbie the robot, hey? Oh, so this is Robbie.
Yeah, so this is Robbie the robot. So before we had Robbie, we used to have 70 people in here actually picking the tea up and putting it onto the conveyor to be processed.
Wow.
But we've used Robbie now. We have Robbie the robot here, who's what he will do is we put a pallet of tea on the tracks, and on the blend there's a number of pallets that go around the tracks, and Robbie will pick up one of the paper sacks and then he'll put it onto the conveyor to go into the first drum so it can start to be blended.
So how does it pick up the sack? I can see it kind of lifting it up, but how does it grip the sack?
So Robbie has is basically a big suction cup. That suction cup sticks onto the sack, and then he's able to pick the tea up and then drop it onto the conveyor as well. And it means he can do it a lot quicker than we can as humans as well.
Robbie's very strong.
He is very strong as well.
Now I know you've got another version over there, another big machine, another big robot. Has that got a name as well? Yeah,
so we have two robots here. Unfortunately, his name is Robbie the Robot 2. So we have Robbie the Robot 1 and Robbie the Robot 2 as well. So not very imaginative.
And both of them are working all the time and lifting the sacks?
Yeah, they're working all the time to lift the sacks when we're actually blending the tea to go through to be blended into tea bags.
Okay, so where is Robbie popping the sacks when he lifts one off and puts one down?
So what Robbie's doing is he'll pick up the sacks, he'll put the sack onto a conveyor, and what that conveyor will then do is that conveyor will take the sack all the way up to the first blending drum, which you can see just over here as well.
Fantastic, so it's taking it right up to the top.
Yeah, and in that first blending drum, what that does is it just removes the paper sack from the tea, and it allows us to certainly make sure that the tea's ready to go into the blending process as well.
Great.
Now, we mentioned earlier about there being 40 different countries that we buy tea from. What you can see here is there's a number of pallets here from different countries in the world. So this one's coming from North India, this one's from South India, this one's from Malawi. We have one here from Mozambique.
Wow.
So what children you might want to do is have a look on a map to find out where some of these countries are. Have one from Zimbabwe again, Kenya. This one's another one from Tanzania. And then finally, we have some tea in here from Argentina as well. So you can see there's a wide range of countries that tea actually gets grown in as well.
It's fantastic. So what's the next stage of the process?
So once we've got the tea away from the sack, what we need to make sure is that there's no objects which might be left in the products as well.
Okay,
so
let's go and take a look. Okay, so the tea that came up on the conveyor, does it end up coming down?
Yeah, it ends up coming down through the buckets here, and what we do is we use some magnets to make sure that if there's any pieces of metal or pieces of paper in there as well, that those will also be taken out the tea as well.
Why would there be metal inside the tea, Keith?
Well, sometimes because in the paper sacks they use metal liners to keep the tea fresh so it doesn't absorb any moisture. We don't have so many problems these days with many objects in there because of in the days when we used to have tea chests, obviously you used to nail the tea chest together, and there used to be perhaps nails and bits of metal which will come off there as well.
Yeah.
So of course you do that.
And you don't want nails in your tea.
Don't want nails in your tea. So after they've gone through a series of magnets, we also make sure that they go through a series of sieves as well to make sure there's anything out. And this is the sieve here, which you can see here, which is processing the tea, and any objects or metal pieces there will actually come out as part of that.
I can actually see some little bits of, I guess bits of paper or like bits of straw or
There's a piece of paper there,
piece of metal.
Paper there. It's almost like a sea of tea just going through here.
Fantastic. And that's all ready to be blended now, is it?
That'll be ready.
Sieved?
Once it's been sieved, it's ready to be blended, and it will go into our blending drums, which is just a bit further over.
Fantastic. Okay, it's time now to watch our next video, which will show you pretty much the whole process that Keith has just talked us through, but in more detail. We'll also learn how the blended tea get made into tea bags.
How are tea bags made? Here in the UK, we have been importing tea by ship for hundreds of years. Here at this tea factory near Liverpool, they produce 100 million tea bags every week. After arriving in these lorries from countries around the world, the paper sacks of tea are unloaded here. And then the skillful job of blending the tea can start. There are 3 tea blenders whose job it is to create the various blends of tea that the factory produces. The tea blenders have a helper called Robbie the robot, who they program to select the different types of tea and then put them onto the conveyor belt.
1 tea, 2 tea, 3 teas, please. Ceylon, rooibos, jasmine leaves, lots.
All the tea is then put into a drum, which can hold 2 tons of tea, and then it is mixed together slowly for exactly 8 minutes. Once the tea is blended, it goes into 1-ton sacks, which are then put into the vacuum system to take to the production line on the factory floor. The tea blenders also make some test cups of tea from these sacks in their tasting room to check the tea tastes as it should. This machine is using the blended tea to make the tea bags. The paper for the tea bags is very special. It's made from natural alpaca fibres. The machine puts just the right amount of tea into each tea bag, then seals them. The tea bag making machine can make 2,000 bags every minute. Next, the tea bags are wrapped in foil to keep them fresh, and then transported on a fast-moving packing line to the cartoning machine. The cartons of tea are then packed into an outer case which is stacked onto a pallet by another robot. Once the pallet has been loaded up, it is wrapped with film and transported on a lorry to your local store. Now the tea bags are put on the shop shelf, ready for us to buy and to make into a refreshing cup of tea.
So now you know how tea bags are made. It's such an interesting process, isn't it? Right, I'm guessing you may have some questions for Keith now, having been in this amazing factory and inside the factory floor there, Keith. So let's find out who may have some questions. Let's go over to Charlton Manor School now. Do you have any questions for Keith?
Hi, I'd like to know what country do you get most of your tea leaves from?
Great question. So which is the country that you get most of the tea from?
So the country which we take most of our tea from is Kenya, and that accounts for the majority of tea that we import into the UK.
Great question. Let's get another question.
Hello, my question is, what's the best time of the year for the tea leaves to be picked?
What a very good question. What is the best time to pick the tea leaves? What time of year?
What time of year? Tea grows all year round. It's just a question of at certain times of the year you don't get so much production or so much yield from the bushes as well. So you can pick tea all year round. Assam in India is somewhere where they do have seasons as well. So what we're looking for is kind of May, June time, which is the bulk yield time as well. So that's probably when we look to pick tea.
So tea's big fan of cold?
No, it's not a big fan of cold. No.
Okay, that's why we don't grow it over here then, obviously, isn't it? That's a really good question. Let's get one more question from Charlton Manor.
Hi, do you have any top tips on how to make the perfect cup of tea?
What a really good question. I'd like to know this. Do you have any top tips for making the perfect cup of tea, Keith?
Well, perfect. Just make sure the water is brewed properly. You allow the tea sufficient time to brew as well. That's very important. And ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody's perfect cup of tea is very different. My perfect cup of tea is very different to yours as well. So just have the tea how you like it.
Yeah. Is it true that if you do it in a teapot, it's better than just dunking it in a
It is. It's about making sure you have most of the tea in contact with water is the best brewing process. So if you do brew it in a teapot to allow the tea to circulate, that's by far the best cup of tea you can make.
Yeah, it is, but I'm quite impatient. I'm quite dunk the tea bag in and that's it. What great questions from Charlton Manor. Let's go over to Stevenson Memorial now. Hello, children. Do we have any questions for Keith?
How do you know that you are getting the finest quality tea?
Great question. So Keith, you'll know this. How do you know you've got the finest quality of tea?
Because we taste every single blend or sack of tea that comes in here as well. We make sure that we know the quality is absolutely spot on as well. So the tea tasters here will taste the product when it arrives to make sure we've got the quality that we bought in the auction.
Great. You don't need any more tea tasters, do you?
No.
I think I'd be very good at a tea taster. That sounds like a really good job. What a great question. Let's get one more from Stevenson Memorial now.
Where does the name Thai food come from?
I don't know. Where does the name Thai food come from, Keith?
Okay, so Thai Food, the brand, originated in 1903. It was started by a Birmingham grocer called John Sumner. He took the name from the Chinese name for doctor, and that's why it has Thai has a small dot in between Thai and Fu. He introduced it as Thai Food Tips because at the time it was very much sold as a cure for indigestion.
Wow, what a fascinating story. Yeah. That's great. Great questions, everybody. I've learned so much. The one thing that I have learned as well, which I didn't realise, it's actually blended tea that goes into the tea bags, Keith, isn't it? So could you tell us a little bit more about the blend that makes up one of these tea bags?
OK. So we spoke earlier about the Camellia sinensis bush, and the majority of tea that we drink in the UK is black tea. Within black tea, we saw on the video how there was different grades of tea, and just along here we have different grades of tea. So this grade of tea here has very large particles. This is known as a BP1 grade. We have a much finer grade, PD, so you can see how fine the tea is here, through to the fannings, which is broadly the stalks of the tea, which you can just see here as well. Now, the main thing for a tea blender is to make sure that you blend all of these components together from different origins to get the perfect blend. So, if you're looking at a blend together, this is a blend which goes into one of our main tea products. You can see here it's a mix between all of the different grades of tea down here to get to the perfect cup and liquor quality that we're looking for.
Yeah, I can see a little bit of everything in there. It's a nice mixture. Great blend there, Keith.
It takes a lot of experience to be a tea blender. It takes you about 5 years to become a competent tea buyer and blender as well. Now, one interesting thing to do is we've put some tea on just to show you the difference between the different origins. So,
this is where I get a cup of tea.
You do, yes, yeah. This one here has come from Kenya. So you can see the tea is very orangey in colour and has got a brightness around the edge. This tea here has come from Assam, and you can see here is that it's much lighter in colour. It's got a more malty flavour as well. This tea here has come from Argentina, and you can see how it looks grey and dull and doesn't have as much brightness as well.
Looks like coffee. It's quite dark
coffee,
for tea,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
It will taste very different as well. So of course, with all those different origins and different grades, it's the skill to make sure we blend those together. The one other thing which is really important about tea is to make sure that you brew it in the right water as well. And here we prepared tea. So this is the same tea which has been brewed in hard water and soft water. Tea performs much better in hard water, in soft water, than it does in hard water as well. This is a soft water one here as well. So make sure if you're in a hard water area that you filter the water to get the perfect cup of tea.
Fantastic. Oh, I don't know so much more about tea than I did before. The one thing that I still would like to know, Keith, is obviously we talked about the tea that goes inside the bags, but what is the bag made of? What kind of paper, and why doesn't it flavour the tea?
Okay, so tea bags are made from abaga hemp fibre. It's a bit like a banana tree, and they specifically use that tree to get the fibres to then be made into tea bags. So it's a natural product that's grown in the Philippines and other places as well.
Fantastic. I have learned so much about tea. Thank you so much, Keith. I think it's time that we find out what our children have learned as well. So let's go to each of our schools. Holy Trinity Rosehill School, what have you learned today on this online field trip about tea?
We use the top 2 leaves and the bud of the tea bush to make when we're making tea.
Great. So they've learned that you use the top 2 leaves and the tea bud to make the tea.
Brilliant.
Great. Fantastic learning. Let's go over to Cornish Park School now.
In Wales, people call cup of tea panadol there.
Oh, wow. So that class has learned how to pronounce tea in Welsh.
Oh, wow.
I didn't pick up the name, but I wish I'd have picked up the name. Great, though. They're even learning Welsh and all about tea in Welsh. Fantastic. Let's go to Charlton Manor now to find out what you've learned.
We made our own tea today using fruit, herbs and spices. My favourite was lemon, orange, ginger and cinnamon. And the most interesting fact I learned today was how we drink 100 million cups of tea each day.
That's a really great fact, actually. So you can make tea from spices and orange and different.
You can. So some of the other teas that we use are things like chamomile is here, peppermint, and also I was showing earlier some roses there, where people will just brew roses and drink roses. Not tea. There's no Camellia sinensis tea in it, but it's just roses. But it's got a lovely flavour as well.
Lovely. I'm sure very good for you as
well. Yeah.
Kind of the nice fruity ones. Let's go over to Stevenson Memorial Primary now. Find out what you've learned.
I learned that 75% of tea in Britain is from Africa.
That's really great learning. So 75% of tea that we have in Britain is from Africa.
It is, that's right.
Yay, great. Are you impressed with everything?
I'm very impressed.
That's great. Thank you so much, Keith. We've really enjoyed today's online field trip. Last question for you. What's the best thing about working with tea?
It's got to be drinking cups of tea every day.
Yes. As I said, if you do need a tea taster or just someone to make the tea, I'm quite happy coming and working here because I love tea. Thank you so much, children. It's been great having you take part with us today. Don't forget, after today's online field trip is finished, we've got lots of activities on the Eat Happy website that you can take part in. You can also learn about how different people from around the world enjoy drinking tea as well. So please do enjoy all that. And if you'd like to take part in a school farm to fork field trip, all you need to do is register on the website. You can see the website address across the screen right now. You can have lots of fun, like the children you can see, visiting a farm or a local producer. So do register for that. But from myself and Keith in the Wirral, we're off for a cup of tea, aren't we?
We certainly are, and a biscuit.
And a biscuit. Goodbye, children. Thank you so much for taking part. Goodbye, Holy Trinity Rosehill. Goodbye, Cornish Park. Goodbye, Charlton Manor. And goodbye, Stevenson Memorial Primary. I think they've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for taking part.